Hey, what's going on everybody? Commander Crane here, and we are back with another Pioneer deck tech, and today we're going to be talking about Aetherdrift Dinosaur Aggro, and that's because Dinosaur Aggro in Pioneer got a huge new card, which we are obviously playing 4 copies of because the card is absolutely perfect for the deck. But there's a few things we have to talk about before we hop into the list here, and the main thing being is the road to 1K subs. We are currently on that road to 1,000 subscribers here on the channel, and we are getting so close. And if you want to be a part of the huge giveaway that's going to be happening once we get there, you're definitely going to want to be subscribed to the channel, so that way you'll be notified as soon as that giveaway does happen. The other thing I have to talk about real quick is I know if you're a follower of the channel here, like, hey, you just made a dinosaur deck recently. You just made one like a month ago in January. And you're correct. I did just make a brand new list, except we obviously got a brand new card from Aetherdrift that I had to talk about. And I'm also wanting to talk about this list because I plan on going to MagicCon Chicago and I'm going to be playing in the Pioneer Cup. And this is pretty much the deck that I'm going to be playing at the actual event here. So let's go and hop into the list here. So if you want to see the entire list before we kind of go more into detail, this is the entire list. The cards that are in yellow are the cards that are either added or subtracted, at least compared to the last time we actually played this deck. I'm not going to be going over the lands. It's a pretty standard Gruul mana base for the most part. The only thing I'll talk about is the 2 Cavernous Souls. I just think 2 Cavernous Souls is the correct number. I know a lot of people think, hey, why don't you just automatically jam 4? The reason I don't is because there's a lot of sideboard cards that we can't actually cast with Cavernous Souls, which obviously that's pretty important that we need to be able to cast like our, good pick your poisons and things like that. So that's why I'm not playing just 4 copies of Cavernous Souls. I think 2 is the correct number. But anyways, also if you want to take a look at the deck list too, it'll be in the description below if you want to check out the link there. Just figured I'd mention that as well. So okay, let's go and hop into it. The dinosaurs. This is why you're actually watching this video. So most of the core of the dinosaurs has not changed, but we're still going to go over it just because not everyone has watched every single video in this little, little sub-series of updating the dinosaur deck here on the channel. So we're obviously playing 4 copies of Marauding Raptor. I still think to this day it is the best card in the entire deck. It's very rare that you get a mana dork that also gets this aggressive and strong. It's just a crazy strong card. I love it. When another dinosaur enters, Marauding Raptor deals 2 damage to it, and if a dinosaur was dealt damage this way, it gets +2/+0, so it attacks as a 4/3, sometimes even a 6/3, depending on what our hand looks like. Overall, best card of the deck. Pugnacious Hammerskull, fantastic addition still from Lost Caverns of Ixalan. It's a 6/6 for 3. That's why we're playing it. The card's incredibly strong. We're also playing 4 copies of Rampaging Raptor, the pseudo-questing beast for this deck. It's just absolutely fantastic once again. I love Rampaging Raptor. I love how aggressive it is. It's also nice if we have a bunch of extra mana laying around, we can just go ahead and pump it a little bit, and it's just fantastic. So definitely a huge fan of the Rampaging Raptor in this deck. We're also playing 2 copies of Ripjaw Raptor. Works really, really well with Marauding Raptor just because of the Enrage. Whenever it's dealt damage, we draw a card. It's also good with another card in this deck, which we'll be talking about later. We're also playing 3 copies of Register Alpha. You'll see that it's yellow there, and that's because it has changed, which we're going to talk about that more later. We're playing 3 copies now as opposed to the original 4, but Register Alpha is still absolutely fantastic. When it enters, we get a 3/3 green dinosaur creature token with trample, so it's 2 dinosaurs in 1. And then we're also playing 2 copies of the mighty Ghalta Primal Hunger. 2 copies is the correct number, I think, at least right now, just because there's a lot of mid-range going around right now. But it's also a card that can get really stuck in your hand sometimes, especially if you're playing against mid-range and control decks. Sometimes you just can't really keep a lot of creatures on the board, and it's really, really hard to cast sometimes. So that's why we're just playing the 2 copies of Ghalta Primal Hunger in the deck. And then obviously, the reason you're really watching this video, the last card we have to talk about is 4 copies of Regal Imperiosaur. 5/4 for only 3 mana, and other dinosaurs you control get +1/+1. So there's a couple things I want to talk about why this card is fantastic in this deck. So before Aetherdrift, it was known that, we were going to be going to Muruganda, and there was a good chance that we were going to be seeing some dinosaurs on the plane. So when it comes to the deck, one of the biggest weaknesses, at least in terms of cards I think that needed to improve, is I've been talking about this for a long time. I said, the deck needs a good 3-drop. It needs a 3-drop, or maybe even a 4-drop, but more specifically a 3-drop. And it's really important that it either A, benefits our other dinosaurs, like gives them trample or gives them haste or something like that. The other thing I also mentioned is that it needs to be able to trade with Shieldred. Shieldred the Apocalypse is just, it's a huge boon against this deck. The deck's already not great against Rakdos midrange, and Shieldred just makes it even worse. So I said it needed to buff our other dinosaurs, but also be able to trade with Shieldred, or at least, you know, be able to have the potential to, or something like that. And lo and behold, we got Regal Imperiosaur. It's the perfect mix for this deck because it makes our other 4-power dinosaurs like Ripjaw Raptor and Rampagey Raptor, which normally wouldn't be able to attack into a Shieldred. It makes them be able to profitably attack into a Shieldred, which is absolutely fantastic. So it's just a 5/4 for 3 mana, which is crazy strong. I do like this more than Pugnacious Hammerskull, just in the sense that Pugnacious Hammerskull, sometimes with how removal goes in the format, sometimes you really can't attack with it that much, just because you have to have another dinosaur. If our opponent's playing their removal spells right, it gets the stun counter, and it can be a little bit awkward. Regal Imperiosaur says, hey, I'm a little bit smaller, but I'm way more consistent. So overall, huge fan of Regal Imperiosaur. The cool thing is, too, if we do have, not that it's going to happen a lot, but Marauding Raptor, if you have multiple copies in play, it can be a little awkward just because your dinosaurs, you know, obviously will take 4 damage and die. But if we do get, you know, 2 Regal Imperiosaurs, we can safely go ahead and play multiple dinosaurs, at least into the face of double Marauding Raptor, which is something that can happen. But overall, I think Regal Imperiosaur is the perfect card that this deck needed to get a boost overall. So, huge fan of Regal Imperiosaur. We're playing the full 4 copies of it, obviously. So let's go and hop into the rest of the cards, because I rambled way too long about Regal Imperiosaur. We're going to be talking about the mana dorks, which is pretty simple. Obviously, I don't consider Marauding Raptor a mana dork, even though it obviously is a cheaper card that gives cost reduction. But anyways, we're playing 4 copies of Land of Elves and 2 copies of Elvish Mystic. I have played 8 copies in the past. I'm back down to 6 for a reason that we'll talk about in just a moment. The TLDR is there's a lot of mid-range in the metagame right now, a lot of Fatal Pushes, a lot of Torch the Towers, and I want to be able to have other ways of having turn 1 plays other than just elves. Plus, they're a really bad draw late game just because you never really want to draw an elf, so I think 6 is the right number for this deck. But a lot of people like to ask me this, and that's why I'm going to talk about it right now. Why aren't we playing Ixali's Lorekeeper or Ortopek Huntmaster? It's simply put, Ixali's Lorekeeper is fantastic, but it doesn't let us cast anything but dinosaurs. So when we're activating our Lair of the Hydras, or we're casting, you know, like any sideboard card, we're not able to actually make mana to be able to do that. So that's why I'm not playing Ixali's Lorekeeper. It's a fine lord if you're just playing dinosaurs, but it doesn't let us do anything else with that mana. So that's why I'm not playing Ixali's Lorekeeper. But the other one is Ortopek Huntmaster. People love to ask me, hey, why aren't you playing Ortopek Huntmaster? Simply put, it's a 2-drop. Yeah, it's fantastic, and obviously in a perfect world where there's really not a lot of removal, or opponent doesn't have removal spells, Ortopek Huntmaster on turn 2 can be absolutely crazy. You're right, it really can. But the problem is if we don't do anything turn 1, and then we go turn 2 Ortopek Huntmaster, and then they just play with fire or Fatal Push it, then we didn't do anything for 2 turns. So that's why I prefer to just play the 1-drops, and then obviously Marauding Raptor. Overall, do I like Ortopek Huntmaster? Yes. Do I like it enough to play it in the deck? I do not. And I have tried it in the past, and I just really wasn't a big fan of it. So I just wanted to go ahead and get that out of the way. But the next thing, and technically the last thing we really have to talk about, is the non-creatures. We're playing 8 non-creatures in the entire deck, and it's pretty simple. We're playing 4 copies of Commune with Dinosaurs and 4 copies of Reckless Rage. I love Commune with Dinosaurs. It originally left the list because we were playing a lot of non-dinosaurs, like we originally were playing, what's the name of it? Screaming Nemesis in the deck, which was good overall, but just with how the metagame is right now, I like playing the 4 copies of Commune with Dinosaurs. It's just fantastic. It's a nice Ancient Strings for the deck. It's good at really any point in the game. Early game, we hit our land drops. Late game, we try to dig for a dinosaur to help us get some more pressure. Overall, it's just a good card. That's why I love the 4 copies of Commune with Dinosaurs. And then Reckless Rage is just a really good removal spell. Being able to do 4 damage to any creature at instant speed is just pretty much crazy, and that really doesn't happen for the most part. Obviously, the downside is we have to do 2 damage to one of our creatures, but guess what? All of our creatures are nice and big and beefy, so they're not actually going to die to the Reckless Rage. The other thing that's really nice is it works well with Ripjaw Raptor, just because whenever Ripjaw Raptor is dealt damage, we get to draw a card. So overall, I really do love the Reckless Rage in this deck as well, and we are at 4 copies of that as well. So, the last thing we have to talk about is the recent changes in terms of the main board. So obviously, what did we recently cut and add to the deck? So obviously, we added the 4 copies of Regal Imperiosaur. We talked about that extensively earlier. I did cut 3 copies of Rampaging Ferocidon. So, It's not that the card is bad, it's just we had to make some room for Regal Imperiosaur. The Rampaging Ferocidons, though, are in the sideboard, so it's not like it's a true actual cut. We're just putting them in the sideboard, but I am not currently playing them in the main anymore. And then I did cut one copy of Regisaur Alpha. It's not, again, that I think Alpha's bad, it's just I wanted to lower the curve a little bit, and Regisaur Alpha I thought made the most sense. There's a chance that I could end up maybe cutting a Galta, depending on how the metagame goes, but I think right now, I still think it was the right call to cut Regisaur Alpha. I've pivoted between 3 and 4 copies in the deck as time has went on. The card's super strong with Marauding Raptor. It's fantastic with Galta. Again, it's not that the card's bad. It's just I'm just cutting 1 copy. So that's what I'm doing currently with Regisaur Alpha, at least in this deck. So the next thing we have to talk about is the sideboard, which again, this is my current 75 that I'm playing. I do love to change my sideboard up a lot. So if you're watching this video like a few weeks after, or even a month after when I initially uploaded this, my sideboard might look a little bit different, but this is how it's currently looking right now. So we're playing 2 copies of Burst Lightning. I was playing Torch the Tower as a way to take care of like really early, like I'm forgetting the name of it all of a sudden. It's the dang mouse, the 1-drop with basically heroic. I'm forgetting the name and it's going to kill me. Hardfire Hero, there we go. But I wanted a cheap removal spell that can help take care of cards like that. But the other thing is with our deck, is with us playing all these mana dorks and 23 lands, we can pretty easily cast the kicker on this. So that's why I decided to play Burst Lightning as opposed to cards like Torch the Tower. We're playing 3 copies of Pick Your Poison. Card's fantastic. It just deals with so many different things. It gets rid of Fable the Mirror Breakers. It gets rid of big Valgavoths or Atraxas. It's just fantastic. I really love Pick Your Poison in this deck. We're playing 2 copies of Grafdigger's Cage, mostly just because there's a lot of Zombify decks going around right now, but there's also a lot of Collected Company decks going around, and Grafdigger's Cage is really, really good at getting rid of, not basically Collected Company, not letting them actually Collected Company. It also could be good against decks that are trying to, cheat creatures from the graveyard or anything like that. But overall, huge fan of Grafdigger's Cage in the deck. We're also playing 3 copies of Magebane Lizard. We've been playing 3 copies for quite some time in the sideboard. It's basically just our anti-spell slinger card. I also love it with Marauding Raptor because we can play it for 1 red, and then obviously it survives the 2 damage. Sure, we don't get the buff with it, but it's still really, really good. And then, like we talked about earlier, the 3 copies of Rampaging Ferocidon. It's just great against, decks that are trying to gain some life. So, like, against Shieldred decks, or even just, like, Angels and other good life gain decks. It's just really, really good. And then we're also playing 2 copies of Tranquil Throwback, a card that's kind of grown on me as of late. I do like the card. It's just got some really, really good modes on it. I started playing it a little bit more, and overall, I still think it's pretty solid. So, definitely a huge fan of Tranquil Throwback in the sideboard. So, that's pretty much everything we have to talk about, but there's a couple things I want to go over real quick. Again, I was so happy to see Regal Imperiosaur in the spoilers. The one thing is, I know with the Morrow's teaser, they did talk about how there was a card that said other dinosaurs get +1/+1. And my fear was it was going to either be just some random uncommon that's really not that strong, or it was going to be like some commander dinosaur and it really wasn't going to make sense for 60 card formats. But lo and behold, we got Regal Imperiosaur, which was, again, I've talked about it a lot. It's the perfect card that this deck needed to help get a huge boost. Do I think that this deck is going to be tier 1? No. Is it going to be a solid aggro deck if you like just playing dinosaurs or you like playing different tribal kindred decks or something? Yeah, I think it's going to be fantastic. I think this deck has been underrated for quite some time now, really since about Lost Caverns of Ixalan. But overall, I'm so happy where this deck has come, at least from where we originally started in terms of, when Pioneer was first to format. But this deck is really, really sweet, and I'm going to be jamming it at MagicCon Chicago, so if you're going to be there, who knows, you might actually run into me playing this deck. But overall, super excited to see where this deck is moving forward, and I'm very excited to jam some Regal Imperiosaur moving forward. So, that takes us to the end of the video here. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe once again. You're not going to want to miss the giveaway once we get there. Huge shout out to our channel members, Ralph, Matt, Arcadius, Ray, Gary, Sermanoki, and Night Red 3. If you're interested in being a channel member, it's only $1 a month, and you get access to the exclusive Commander Crane Discord, as well as other features here on the channel. So, I'm Commander Crane. Thanks for watching this video, and I hope to catch you in the next one.